sitting here looking at Black Bart and thinking, wow, man, I got a really great super dog, you know? Something special. And I hope everybody out there feels exactly that way about their own dog. But since we started this little series on heroes and other hero dogs and others, I have learned some things. I have learned that dogs, no matter what kind, have more abilities than we ever give them credit for, both logically and temperamentally and athletically. They are amazing creatures. Their devotion is beyond belief. And I know we think of war hero dogs, we always think of the big, rough, tough German Shepherd or the high-flying, hard-hitting Malinois, and usually we think of male dogs. This dog I'm going to tell you about today, I think you will agree at the end of these stories, is probably the most amazing dog story I have ever run across. And, you know, like they say about a lot of things in life, you can't make this up. I mean, no one could have ever written this script in 100 years. The dog we're talking about is an English pointer, little female. Her name was Judy of Sussex, and she was the mascot on a river gunboat called the Grasshopper. The Grasshopper, its sister ship was the Gnat. The British ships were patrolling around Malaysia because they had colonies there. World War II had started, Japan was in the war, Germany's ally, and Japan was capable of setting up military bases on any of these deserted islands. There's lots and lots of uninhabited islands around Malaysia, and so the British Navy was patrolling the area to make sure no one set up military bases there and then maybe tried to invade British colonies. Judy was just a hit with everybody. She got on board, she was on the Grasshopper, and if Japanese planes were coming, she would hear the planes, obviously, way before any human ears ever could. So she was good at discovering those. There's something called a cast boat, and I can't remember. It's like a garbage scow, I guess. And they stink really, really bad. I think their main thing was taking human waste from some of the big cities and dumping it in the ocean. And the men hated to go past one of these boats if it was going past them going out to sea. And Judy would smell the stuff, you know, way before any human would bark and warn the men, and they'd all go downstairs and batten down the hatches so they didn't have to smell it till they were past the ship. So Judy had a lot of little talents and skills on that boat in this very peaceful situation at this time, just being a dog. That all ended one day when the Grasshopper was on patrol through some of these islands, and Japanese planes approached and began firing on the boat. They were able to disable the ship, keep it from traveling, and started fires on the deck. And as the fires began to creep close to the ammo supply, the captain ordered everybody in the lifeboats to evacuate. They all get in their boats, they head to the nearest uninhabited island, and when they get to the island, they look around and realize that they had forgotten Judy. Now the boat's not blown up, it's just disabled and it was on fire, okay? It hadn't sunk. So these islands are literally uninhabited, and some of them are just big rocks. A lot of them they're more than rocks. They've got all sorts of jungle and you name it, yucky stuff on them. So they're sitting on this island, and the captain realizes they don't have supplies of any kind. They don't know how far it is. If they can get to the ocean side of the island, then they have a shot at flagging down one of the bigger ships and being rescued. And so he sends one of the men back in a lifeboat to gather up any supplies he could off of the Grasshopper, his ship. And when the man goes down in the hole looking for supplies, he hears something whimpering, and it's dark, of course, but he goes towards the whimper and realizes that it was Judy. her bed was down there in that part of the ship, and a large locker had fallen and pinned her to the ground in her bed. So he pulls the locker off, saves her life, not knowing that the act of saving her life is probably what was going to save his life in just a short time later. He takes her back. The captain gets his coordinates. He's now got compasses and this sort of stuff, and he figures out they've got about a 100-mile march to get to the ocean side of the island. They can walk that far, but they have one major problem: no fresh water, none. You're going to march 100 miles in the heat, the tropical jungle heat, with no water. Judy had been ashore for 24 hours at this point, and as if she was reading the captain's mind, he was trying to come up with a solution. She is going up and down a certain area of the island, and all of a sudden she starts digging. Yep, she did. She found a natural freshwater spring, and the water came gushing. They filled up everything they could, every container they could, and they began to march to the other side of the island. Well, when they get to the other side of the island, hoping to flag down a British ship, they encounter the Japs. And they are captured, all the men thrown on the ship, and hauled off to a prison camp. I forget the name of the first prison camp. But they are held there, and Judy's brought right along with them. She's smuggled in. They have a bunch of rice sacks and sitting all around. They seem to be everywhere. They smuggle her into the camp, and it's, no one really objects to her being there. And the gentleman who was she met there at the camp was named Frank Williams. He would end up being her lifetime partner. And so Judy started displaying some little talents. Remember, these are all prisoners of war. They're not eating much. They're hardly mistreated. They said they were subjected to every degradation that the Japanese guards could think of. One of Judy's talents was the guards would go start beating somebody, and Judy would start barking, and nipping at their heels. And the guards did not like Judy. And Frank Williams got concerned, realizing some of the guards were trying to bayonet her because they can't waste ammunition on a dog. And things were, he realized, escalating. She would warn prisoners if there were poisonous snakes around. She kept the spirits and the morale up, and she had become his best friend. So he didn't want anything to happen to her, so he had this amazing thought. The commandant of the prison camp was named Banno, B-A-N-N-O, and the commandant, and he kind of liked dogs. So Frank Williams approached the commandant, got permission to see him, and offered him a deal. He said, I'm going to breed Judy when I can, and I'll give you a pup, pick of the litter, if you will put her on the rolls and make her an official prisoner of war. That way she supposedly couldn't be shot without a good reason. And the commandant, Frank had got over to his office about 5 o'clock in the evening when he knew he was popping a few sakis, and he was in a good mood, so he said, yeah. And right then, Judy became the first, and to my knowledge, to this day, the only registered prisoner of war dog ever held in any prison camps. Her official name was 81A Medina, M-E-D-I-N-A. That's the name of the prison camp that they were in. So Judy now was protected from being shot, but she still had all the degradations and the problems. She would go out in the woods and go hunting. She would bring Frank, don't get mad at me, ladies, she'd bring him a monkey every now and then, and she would bring snakes. She would bring whatever she could, and bring it back. And a lot of the prisoners say they would have died of starvation if it hadn't been for little bitty crumbs that this dog would bring back to them from the jungle. She's starving herself with every rib sticking out, but she brought back food to those other sailors. Just one of her many, many traits. Well, comes time when they're fixing to move, or Captain Bano, Commandant Bano, he gets transferred to another post, and they're going to move all the prisoners to another camp. And another commandant's coming in to supervise the move, and his name was Nishi, Nishi. And he hates dogs. He is doing everything he can to get rid of Judy. And so the men are getting on they're loading them up on a ship to take them to this other prison camp. And they're fixing to load up Judy, and he says, no, throw her in the ocean. Well, the men don't throw her in the ocean. They hide her in the jungle because they're still loading up on this ship, packing it up and everything. And while they're packing everything up, loading, getting ready to transport, Frank Williams starts teaching Judy all sorts of commands to follow, hand signals and little soft whistles and commands. She's staying out in the jungle. They had a place there and told her to stay. She would come back to the camp at night. Dog figured all this out. They get ready to leave, and he throws her in rice sacks and throws her over his shoulder and smuggles her on board. Now they had, I forget, there were 600 or 700 men on this ship, and they were standing. Most of them on the deck in the sun. Frank Williams stands for hours and hours with his sack over his back. I think I've heard one story says 3 hours, other says 6, but it was a lengthy period of time. Judy's in this sack, never makes a sound, never makes a wiggle. And they're steaming their way to the new prison camp. He's standing there, they're all sitting in the sun, when all of a sudden, Judy's already been shot down out of the water by Japanese planes, but now they're on a Japanese ship going to another Japanese prison camp, and a British ship spots them and opens fire, blowing that prisoner ship to smithereens. Everybody hits the water, everybody's trying to evacuate. Frank Williams, at this point, he's got Judy, and they're inside the ship's hold. He's trying to get her the only way to save her. He can't walk her out for fear the Japs will see her and shoot her. So he goes to one of the portholes and shoves, it's 10 inches. To give you an idea of how skinny she is. We're talking about something maybe about this round. He goes to that porthole, picks up this skin and bone dogs, shoves her through the porthole, and drops her 16 feet into the ocean. He then joins the rush of people panicking to get out, to save their lives and get off that sinking ship. Hits the water, where he swam around for a long period of time. Some people say hours. I doubt that he had the energy or strength to do that. Looking for Judy. Couldn't find her. Swims ashore, and all he can think about is what could have happened to Judy. He's lost all of his friends. He's lost everyone he knows. He's been a prisoner of war for 2 years now. The people he did know are out. The few that he did know that he called friends are out in the water, possibly drowning. The water is covered with oil. There's debris everywhere, and there's no sign of Judy. What happens next is, well, it's time for me to go. So I guess what happens next is even bigger than what's happened already, and I'll be glad to tell you all about it next week. But right now, Thursday night, 6 o'clock, Guard Dogs and Good Dogs. Don't forget to tune in. We'll tell you all about the end of Judy's trek, and whether she survives, whether Frank Williams survives, and you already know who won the war. So see you guys next week, or see you Thursday night, 6 o'clock. Thanks.